Hi everyone, my name is Katie Myers and I work in adult services at the Crystal Lake Public Library. Welcome to our pollinator garden, birds, bees, and butterflies pollinator garden programming. And we are so lucky tonight to have Sarah Michael with us, generously donating her time and her knowledge to all of you. So thank you so much, Sarah, for being with us tonight. Now, if you have any questions while Sarah goes through her presentation, be sure to use the Q&A feature. You should find that probably at the bottom of your screen. And we'll keep track of all those questions and be sure to get to them when Sarah's done with her presentation. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Sarah.
Great. Thank you so much, Katie. Yes, my name is Sarah McHale, and thank you so much for having me here tonight to speak with you about planting your own pollinator garden that's going to support so many different kinds of life. I am with the Land Conservancy of McHenry County. We are a nonprofit land trust here in McHenry County. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization. So we are totally member supported. And what a land trust is we preserve and take care of land, and we support the homeowners, the landowners that want to do the same thing. So we work with people in a variety of ways. Sometimes they might want to put a conservation easement on their property, which preserves it forever. As a land trust, it is our job to uphold their conservation standards for their easement forever. We also work with landowners in less formal ways, and I'm going to talk about some of those, like through our Conservation at Home program and our Oak Keepers programs. We do a lot of restoration work on the land that we own, which we fundraised to outright purchase and preserve around the county. We also have an agricultural easement program, and we work with local farmers as well to kind of connect people on regenerative farming practices. We do events when we're able to. We do spring and fall native tree, shrub, plant, rain barrel composter sales. So all kinds of information can be found on our website, which you're going to find in a resource slide at the end. Don't worry, you're going to be mailed a recording of this. Or you can follow us on Facebook as well. Okay, so let's get started. To begin, before we start talking about pollinator gardens, let's talk a little bit about what is a pollinator. And basically, it's any creature that comes into contact with pollen and moves it to another flower where those little chunks of pollen are able to combine with the pollen on the other plant. And they mix, they fall down the right tube, and pollination occurs. And that is when a fruit is able to develop and eventually a seed. So that is what pollination is. So pollination can happen with all different kinds of creatures. Could be bees, butterflies, wasps, beetles, birds, bats, all different kinds of creatures are pollinators. This is a picture of a little native bee on a tiny pasque flower, which is a native plant that I have in my garden and I absolutely love. So let's define native plant. A native plant is any plant that grows in a certain region that has been there for a really long time with no human intervention. Okay, so we've got all different kinds of native plants that grow in this area. They grow in communities. Like there's certain sets of them that are friends basically, and they all kind of support each other. They all have nutrient exchange systems basically where they all help each other out. Non-native plants are usually brought in by people generally for the most part. They don't have an evolved relationship with our native plants, so they don't coexist and support each other. Okay, so that's why we are huge advocates for the use of native plants. And I'm going to talk more about that. Okay, so why do pollinators care about pollination? I mean, I guess they technically don't really care. They care about survival. So one thing that they get out of it is nectar. So when a butterfly, such as this monarch, lands on a flower to extract nectar with its proboscis, which is like the long tube-like structure that's basically like a coiled straw, and they uncoil that and stick it down inside a flower and are able to extract nectar. When they do that, sometimes pollen sticks on them, but they're also getting sugary carbohydrates from the nectar, which is a very important energy source for these insects, especially migrating monarch butterflies who in the spring and in the fall migrate all the way to Mexico and then back up north. So they get sugary carbs, and the pollen has protein, fat, and other minerals. So some creatures like bees will gather pollen and they'll make it into a little ball, and they will like lay their egg kind of on top of that little ball. And when that egg hatches, and you can kind of see this in the picture, when the egg hatches, the little larva, which is like a little caterpillar basically, will feed on that pollen ball. So it's a protein and fat source that's all ready for the little developing bee larva. The other reason that we care about pollinators is because their numbers are declining, and birds as well in there. And why are their numbers declining so much? It's a variety of reasons. It's not super cut and dry. You know, there's a whole variety of reasons, such as habitat loss due to, I mean, think about it, residential areas, agriculture, all kinds of things are happening and have been happening for a long time. So habitat loss, chemical use, so whether it's fertilizers messing up our waterways, people using pesticides, herbicides, all different kinds of chemical use is greatly affecting the population of all of these creatures, insects, birds, mammals as well, honestly, and reptiles and amphibians too. And then they're also experiencing competition from non-native wildlife and plants. So all of the habitat, the plants are facing competition from non-native plants that are brought in usually through the horticultural industry. Like we're buying them and we're putting them in our yards, and they're escaping out into our natural areas, as well as non-native wildlife. So an example could be the emerald ash borer or a gypsy moth. Those are very well-known things that are creating a lot of destruction on our ash trees. House sparrows are an example of a bird that greatly affects bluebirds. So there's all different kinds of examples of the ways that these non-native plants and animals upset the balance that exists in a native ecosystem. The good news, not to be all doom and gloom here, is that your yard and what you do in your yard can statistically make a difference. This isn't just feel good, you know, put these plants in because they're pretty. No, you can actually ecologically make a difference. So the endangered rusty-patched bumblebee, they are the first federally endangered bumblebee species in the lower 48 states of the United States. They are found in the Midwest in locally owned parks that have native plants, and they are found in people's backyards that have native plants. That is a federally endangered species of bumblebee that is documented in McHenry County, okay? So in people's yards. So this is something that you can do, that you can help with. You can put milkweed and other plants in to help the monarch butterflies. And we're going to talk all about that, as well as things you could put in to help the birds as well, which have experienced a global decline in population numbers over the last 50 years, basically. Okay, so let's get started with native plant gardening. Native plants can go in all different places in your yard. They can go anywhere. They could be a foundation planting. They could be a standalone garden bed. They can be incorporated into a garden bed that you already have that maybe has some non-native plants in it. You can just dot some native plants in with it. You can really make it what you want it to be. It can be as manicured as you want it to look, or as wild and crazy. It can be short. You know, you could choose plants that are under 2 feet if you want, or you can choose plants that are 8 feet tall. It's all in the choices that you make, okay? And ecologically, just because you choose shorter plants, they're still just as valuable, okay? So a native plant garden is going to provide for pollinators and birds and all kinds of creatures. It's going to provide food, all right? Things like nectar, pollen, berries, insects for other creatures to eat. It's an entire food web that is happening inside your native plant garden. It's fascinating to watch. They're also going to provide shelter. So in this picture, take a look at those grasses. The bases of those fine feathery grasses, like you could see one down in the lower right corner there, they're really dense, and they provide fabulous places for insects to be able to rest and hide down in there and spend the night and hide from predators. Native plant gardens also do not require any chemical input. So you don't need to fertilize them. You shouldn't fertilize them. They do not spray insecticides or anything like that on there. When you have a diverse set of plants, you're going to attract a diverse set of insects, and they're all going to balance each other out. The predators are going to eat the prey, and it's all going to balance. It's a wonderful thing. They also just provide beauty, okay? So there are native plant gardens in every single kind of living situation you could imagine, whether it's rural 60 acres or a very traditional suburban neighborhood with homeowners associations. This particular picture here is from a neighborhood in Crystal Lake with a homeowners association. So they're absolutely beautiful, and they provide life right outside your doorstep, which is just fascinating to be able to watch and see, especially if you have kids. It's like a little science lesson. They're witnessing metamorphosis and all kinds of things that are happening right in there. So one insect that everybody kind of knows about and is really attracted to are the monarch butterflies. So you can put some plants in order to attract and support them. And monarch butterflies are, their caterpillars are specialists on milkweeds. So milkweeds are plants in the Asclepias genus, okay? Whatever. So in this garden here, there's a bright orange flower in the very front. And in that previous slide that I just showed you, let me go back, this one, that bright orange flower, that's an Asclepias. That's called butterfly weed, all right? Asclepias tuberosa. That is a milkweed. Monarch butterflies can only lay their eggs on milkweed. Then their eggs hatch. Those caterpillars can only eat leaves in the milkweed family. They have a specialist relationship, all right? Then the caterpillars go through metamorphosis. They turn into their little chrysalis, and then they become the adult butterfly. Fantastic. The adult butterfly then needs nectar, right? They can get nectar from a whole variety of plants. So it's important that we don't just have milkweed in our gardens. We need a bunch of other plants as well to provide nectar for all different kinds of insects. That's the cool little secret about this. People think they're putting in a native plant garden for monarchs. So many different things are going to benefit, and it's really cool. I mean, you'll get all kinds of butterflies and little native bees that are not aggressive at all. All right, so let's look at a few of my favorite plant combinations in this particular garden design, which was designed by Ringer's Landscaping out of Fox River Grove. And they designed this for the Barrington Area Conservation Trust, which is a neighboring land trust to us. I really like in the front where I put in red, great combo. I really like that fine feathery grass, which is called prairie drop seed. It's letter I. I like it coupled or right next to butterfly weed. So ecologically, this makes sense. You would find these growing together out in a full sun prairie. This is a garden design for full sun, so more than 5 hours of sun, okay? Direct sun during the summer between the hours of 10 a.m. and 5 p.m., all right? So you find them growing together. Butterfly weed has a really deep taproot, and then prairie drop seed right next to it has a really fibrous, hairy root system. So they occupy different places under the soil in a different way, which is fantastic. We need diversity above ground as well as below ground. So not only does it aesthetically, from a design perspective, make a stunning combination, but ecologically it makes a lot of sense as well to pair these together. All of these roots in these native plants, they act like a sponge and they really help absorb stormwater, which is really a wonderful, just kind of added side benefit of these gardens as well. The other really great thing about this design is that it incorporates plants that are going to be blooming from early in the summer until like early in the fall. And that's important since these insects are, different kinds of insects are active at different times of the season and even different times of the day. So we've got things like pale purple coneflower, letter D, which started blooming like a week-ish ago around here. And then it's going to hand the baton off to the butterfly weed, which will be blooming. And then the liatris or the blazing star, which is letter F. And then it'll hand it off to, letter H, the rudbeckias. It's all the like black-eyed Susan type plants. And it just keeps on going, which is awesome. Because then your garden is pretty, and also because insects are able to find nectar. So there's a couple things that I would change about this. I would add some kind of shrub, potentially New Jersey tea, and I'm going to show you a picture of that in a couple slides. I would also potentially add an aster for a fall blooming source of nectar. So something like silky aster is a really great, well-behaved short aster that doesn't necessarily get super leggy like some asters do. And then there's another aster called aromatic aster, which I'm going to show you a slide of that one. That one can be a little aggressive, so you've got to be okay with kind of editing it out. That's just a fancy term for rip some of it out. Okay, you don't feel bad about that. The other thing that I would potentially not include in a small garden is Joe Pye weed. Joe Pye weed is a very vigorous grower, and it can get pretty tall, especially in rich garden soil. So if you don't control it, in 5 years, that garden will be Joe Pye weed. Okay, so if you put it in, because it's a great nectar source, for like those beautiful tiger swallowtail butterflies. They love it. If you put it in, you just got to commit to taking some of it out each year. And there you go, free plants. Give them to friends, put them in other places in your yard. Or if you're like, no, that is too much work, don't put Joe Pye weed in, and that's okay. All right, so some of my pollinator favorites. Oh, okay. Pollinator favorites and mine too. Early bloomers, prairie smoke. This is the sweetest little plant. It's like a foot tall, and in the early spring, it's gonna start blooming in like, I don't know, end of April, early May. And then it develops into this smoky, wispy seed heads that are just absolutely beautiful. The foliage, the leaves, they stay green and they suppress weeds amazingly. And they bloom so early in the spring when the queen bumblebees are first coming out from overwintering, and they are able to get nectar out of these plants. So these are important to have these kinds of things available. They like full sun, okay? So full sun, they could do a variety of soil, they just don't like standing water. So don't put them in like a really wet, mushy area. Okay, back to the butterfly weed. I'm kind of obsessed with this plant. It's basically one of the most perfect landscaping plants because it's bright and showy and orange for a long time, for a good 3 weeks. And it's supporting a ton of different insects. Yeah, the monarchs love it. You can see the caterpillar there eating it. That's really cool, that monarch caterpillar. And then there's a ton of different insects that get nectar from it. So fabulous. And it stays short, stays under 3 feet. So that's cool. All right, aromatic aster. I love this plant. This is an aster that forms a mounding habit, so it almost looks like a shrub. It's not, but it kind of looks like it. It is the latest blooming aster in northern Illinois, blooming mid to late September, even sometimes into early October, when the monarchs are just getting ready to leave and migrate all the way to Mexico. So having these late blooming plants is really important too, for any insects that haven't started overwintering yet. This is one that's a vigorous grower, you guys. Man, my mom, every year I have to tell her, Ma, you gotta rip some of that out. We're just gonna take over. This one is so easy to dig up in the spring and transplant. Man, I just like chuck it in areas of my yard. I just like dig a hole and chuck it in there, and I don't even water it, and it is totally fine and grows wonderfully. So this is a vigorous grower. If you don't want to deal with that, don't put this one in. Put the silky aster in instead. Just Google that one. That's a good one to have. Okay, grasses. We cannot neglect grasses in our garden designs. For one thing, they're beautiful, okay? You guys, they provide year-round interest. When the flowers are not cool looking over the fall and winter, the grasses are, especially that little blue stem. It turns that russet coppery gold color in the fall and winter and early spring when everything's just like brown and ugly. The little blue stem looks amazing. It's also a host plant for little skipper butterflies. That just means they lay their eggs on it and the caterpillars eat it. Cool, grasses are pollinator supporters too. Prairie dropseed, the one on the left, fountainy thing of beauty. I can't even say enough about this plant. Okay, lots of little bees and stuff and they're not aggressive. I have never once been stung, okay, in all these years of working in my native plant gardens and site visits and everything. I've never been stung in a native plant garden. Little bees and stuff will hide down in the bases of those grasses. Okay, you can support pollinators and birds and everything else in the shade as well. These are a few of my favorite shade combinations that are wonderful pollinator supporters. wild ginger, and I'm going to show you a slide of these up close too. Wild ginger, which I tell people is kind of like a native hosta. It's not related to a hosta at all, whatever. But its growth form is similar. Jacob's ladder, that lovely little blue flower, which bloomed in May, absolutely beautiful. And then wild strawberry as a ground cover. Let me show you these up close. You could see the ginger up in the right, just a beautiful, sweet little heart-shaped leaf that, holy cow, does it suppress weeds. It grows dense. It's awesome. The wild strawberry, yes, you will get strawberries. How cool is that? My kids run all over and they're just like grazing off of the landscaping. It's really cool. My husband does it. Okay, I do it too. In the fall, if it gets enough sun, it'll turn that bright red color. It's really pretty. If it doesn't get a lot of sun, it'll be a more muted reddish color. It spreads by those runners, just like strawberries in your gardens do. So you just gotta like move the runners wherever you want them to be, or just rip it out. If you like that flagstone path, just rip the runners off that. Not a big deal. And there's a close-up of the Jacob's ladder down there, which there are little tiny bees that can only get pollen and nectar from plants in the Pulmonium family. So how cool is that? You don't even have to know that. Like, just put the plants in. You don't even have to technically know all these things. The insects will find it. Here's another one for shade. This is like a brand new little baby geranium. They really fill out. This could do shade or sun. And there's little Andrina bees that specialize on the geranium plants, native wild geraniums, okay? And then that little sweet white, kind of almost diagonal little guy down towards the right bottom corner is called Bishop's Cap. And that's a really pretty delicate little guy too, that little halictid bees gather nectar and pollen off of. Okay, so let's talk about birds specifically and what we can do to support them. And honestly, I'm not even going to talk about bird feeders right now, you guys, because you just put these plants, trees, and shrubs in, and that's what the birds need. They don't need bird feeders. You don't need to buy seed for them, birds to get all over the ground and the squirrels to fight over. Put these things in, and this is nutritionally what the birds actually need, okay? So service berries, native service berries, and there's a couple different kinds. Just look for something in the Amelanchier family. Absolutely gorgeous as both a traditional specimen landscaping shrub, or it could be a small tree as well if it's a single trunk one that you get, whatever, it doesn't matter. They get like 20-ish feet tall, something like that. They don't grow super fast. You gotta just be patient. Really sweet white flowers on them in the spring. They're one of the first. They're not the first, they're one of the early flowering shrubs around here. They're done now. And they've developed these really cool red berries on them. So that is a cedar waxwing. Let me tell you, I've got service berries in my yard, and I try to get the berries because they taste so good. You can eat the berries too, but the birds love them, all right? So especially cedar waxwings and colorful birds too, like the rose-breasted grosbeaks and scarlet tanagers. I mean, just so many different things love these berries because they're providing a lot of nutrition that non-native shrubs are not. Non-native shrubs like buckthorn and honeysuckle, they're actually harmful for the birds and go right through the, okay, they give the birds diarrhea, let's just say that. And it's bad, it's dehydrating for the birds, it's not giving them any nutrition at all. So put these native shrubs in, fantastic, and they're just beautiful. Service berries are also a host plant for all kinds of different moths and butterflies, like this blue spring moth. they lay their eggs on the serviceberry leaves, and these little caterpillars are able to eat those leaves of the serviceberry. So you put a serviceberry in, holy cow, you're just hosting all kinds of things. A lower shrub that you can put in, that serviceberry, it can do shade, it can do sun, it can do dry, it can do medium, just don't put it in standing water. Like, it can do a whole variety of stuff. All right, New Jersey teas. They are under 4 feet or so. They really like dry soil. They can do medium, just like normal topsoil, normal garden soil. They're not going to like it extremely wet. So again, they don't want, standing water. I have a love-hate relationship with this shrub. I love it when it is in all of its glory and beautiful and blooming. And then there are some years where it just randomly dies back. And nobody really knows why it does this sometimes. We don't know. So sometimes rabbits really like to gnaw on the base of these too. So either cage it when it's new or pile a ton of leaves around it over the winter. Somebody that owns a nursery told me that can help. So honestly, what I do with the New Jersey teas, because I love them so much and the pollinators love them so much, I just put them in a part of my garden where it's not going to be the major focal point. Like, okay, cool, it's a year where the New Jersey tea is going to bloom. Amazing, awesome. And then some years, it's not. And other plants just kind of fill in a little bit. Not a huge deal. Another thing you can do for pollinators and birds too is incorporating dead wood into your garden. So it could be decorative, like fancy wood, or it could just literally just be chunks of wood that you find somewhere and you just leave it in your garden and plants cover it up. There's a ton of little bees and beetles that are going to tunnel inside this wood and go through their life cycle. So lay their eggs in there, the whole larva, pupa, the whole metamorphosis thing can happen inside this dead wood, all contributing to the food web happening in your garden. All right. I have chunks of dead wood that are laying out in my woods area. And there's one that's like 3 feet tall and it's got a hole in it. And there are little chickadees going in and out of it. And I'm pretty sure they're using it as a little nesting site. It's because they're cavity nesters. And I always thought of them as nesting higher up in the tree. I didn't realize they would nest so low, but I'm pretty sure that's what they're doing. So you never know what you're going to provide habitat for. So even something like dead wood can do a lot for you and for the bugs. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about native plant garden maintenance. This is super important because I think that native plants have gotten a bad reputation as being weedy and unkept. And honestly, it doesn't have to be that way. It's all how you manage the habitat and the plant choices that you make. It could be as manicured and formal as you want it to look. And as native plant ambassadors, that's kind of what I like to think of us as, right? Let's portray these plants in as beautiful of a fashion as we can. So some tips on how to do that. I've already mentioned, don't be afraid to edit out extremely vigorous plants. Don't be afraid to do that, okay? Sometimes people feel guilty, like, I worked so hard to get these plants established, and don't feel guilty. Give them away if you feel that guilty. Give them away to people or put them in other parts of your yard. The other thing I really like to use is a hoe. So let's talk a little bit about this. Instead of digging weeds out by the roots, I like to slice them about 1 inch or so below the soil surface. Here's why. When you pull a weed out by the roots, you are creating a soil disturbance. Guess who loves soil disturbance? Weed seeds. So they're exposed to light and to moisture when you pull that weed out. And they're just gonna have a party. They're just gonna vigorously germinate and grow all over the place. That's annoying, right? And like a lot of work. So when you hoe consistently and regularly, okay, that's the key with a hoe, is that you get out there and you visit your garden, say once a week. Depends on how much it's raining, honestly, but like say once a week or so, you get in there with the hoe, you slice that weed about an inch or so right below the soil surface, and you're not creating a soil disturbance. You're keeping it in place. You're not disturbing the native plants that are growing nearby either. So you're giving them a chance to establish and let their seeds disperse properly too. And you just need to consistently do that. No, you are not killing the weed the first time you slice it with the hoe. You're not, but you're going to starve it. And let me tell you, working with a hoe is so much faster than with a trowel and digging and wrestling to get that weed out. All right. So there's two different kinds of hoes that I use. One is the tall stand-up hoe. It doesn't have to be that particular one, whatever. There's all different kinds of them that have different blades, and it doesn't matter. The reason I like this hoe, I use this one on my newer gardens that have more space between the plants, and I'm able to stand up. I don't have to be down on my hands and knees, you know, to do it. So that's cool. I bought this one for my mom after she had hip surgery and she couldn't get down on her hands and knees to be weeding. You know, she couldn't do it. So this is a great option for that. The other thing I do with some of my garden beds, where I keep a maintained cut edge around it. Weeds love that cut edge. I make that cut edge the width of that hoe right there. So I can just go through pretty quickly, like 10 minutes or so, and weed the whole outside edge of it. It's pretty nice. That little handheld one, that thing is so cheap, you guys. That's like less than 15 bucks on Amazon. I am able to use that on my more established, densely planted gardens. Native plants, you should be planting them really dense, like 1 per square foot, okay? So I'm able to really get in with the corner of that little hoe and just break off weeds. And honestly, when these plants get super established after like 2 or 3 years, I'm weeding garden beds once every 2 weeks in like 5 minutes. So fast. It's wonderful. It's absolutely wonderful. And over time, you'll see that the weed seed bank is depleted. So that's gone. And if there is a little disturbance in your garden, what's going to germinate are native plants that like disturbance. So that's awesome. Things like columbine, you'll find that popping up in little areas. So you know you've had success when that starts happening, okay? All right, so I already talked about maintaining a neat edge. Don't let plants flop all over the place. Like, it just looks bad. So if you've got a front sidewalk and you've got a bunch of native plants along it, try to put plants in that are like under 3 feet. There's tons of them that are beautiful. So keep things short and keep your sidewalk and your walkway clear. You know, people who are not plant people, they don't like it when plants touch them. So if we want to portray these native plants in as positive of a fashion as we can, don't have them laying all over the place. Just like cut it back if you need to and don't feel bad. The other thing, if you have leaves that fall in your garden beds or anywhere in your yard, put the leaves in your garden beds. That is free mulch. Fantastic. Leave them in there. All right. That stuff is like compost mulch right there. That's what you want. So leaves, leave them in your garden bed. There's a ton of like awesome insects like fireflies and cool tiny native bees that all burrow under those leaves, and that's where they're spending the winter, some of them. Okay, so like we need these leaves in there. And your plant stems, leave them at least 15 inches. So let's say it's the fall and you want to cut your plants back. Okay, first of all, you don't have to. You don't have to cut your plants back at all. You can leave them standing, and then the birds all winter are going to be feeding off the little seed heads. It's really cool. But if there's certain plants that you're like, no, I can't aesthetically handle these stems being this tall all winter long, cut them back to 15 inches. They have found through research that native insects are using the first 15 inches of those stems to overwinter, okay? And then whatever you do cut off, if you want, you can lay it in your garden beds, and there you go, free organic material. Awesome. Or you could chop it up if you want to and leave it in there. So this is what they've started doing in the Lurie Garden in Chicago in Millennium Park. And this is a big deal for them because it's this like hyper manicured, professionally, globally known garden. And they have started leaving the plant stems up, and it was like a big deal for their designer and whatever. And they're really happy with it. And they put up these little interpretive signs too to kind of explain. No, they're not just being lazy. There's a reason why they're leaving them there. And honestly, when all the plant stems are cut to that same dimension, it looks fine. It doesn't even look bad. It looks purposeful. And here's an example of some little insects, like this little carpenter bee that will nest inside the cut plant stems. So if you need to cut them in the fall, whatever, go ahead and cut them, leave 15 inches, and then leave that stubble there the next spring, because those bees are gonna emerge from the stems, and then some of them will go back in and build a nest in there too, okay? So these dead plant material, that has importance too. So you could see this is evidence that a plant stem is being excavated by a tiny solitary little native bee. You can see the little like white shavings that looks like white sawdust at the entryway to that hollow stem. So that's really kind of a cool thing. These quotes are from, and these pictures are by Heather Holm, who is a fantastic person to follow on Facebook or Instagram if you are interested in native plants at all and their insects. On my resource page, I'm going to talk to you more about her books because her books are amazing too. Okay, so here in this county, we have a program called Conservation at Home, and that is run by me through the Land Conservancy of McHenry County. And what it is a list of suggested ideas of things that you can do in your yard to incorporate sustainability. Just put some native plants in, really, that's what it comes down to. Put some native plants in, and I come over and do a site visit, and we'll give you some custom advice about native plants for your yard and answer your questions. And I send you like this extensive follow-up email and whatever. And it's just a lot of fun. And anytime you have questions after that, you can email me and ask me questions, and I send out like periodic informational emails and tell you sometimes when certain plants are on sale and whatever. If you meet 10 of the items on the checklist, which if you have native plants in your yard, you pretty much will, you can qualify to get a yard sign, which is a really cool way to talk to your neighbors, your friends, your family about the importance of using native plants, okay? If you do not, if you're like, no, I don't have 10 of those things yet, I'll still come do a site visit for you. I want to help you. I want to help give you the information from the beginning if necessary. And then when you get the 10 things, cool, I'll bring a sign back out to you. The fee for the site visit is $65, and that includes a 1-year membership to our nonprofit land trust, which is how we do the work we do, through member support. Remember, we are not a tax dollar supported organization. If you're a member, you also get invited to cool member events if we're able to have events. Like we do this seed sharing event, which is so fun, and you get a 10% discount too if you order trees and shrubs and plants and whatever through us. So more information is on our website. Oh, there's so many people, you guys, in McHenry County doing this. It's so fun when you think about all of the little pockets of habitat that are being created all around the county, and not just our county. Conservation at Home was started by the Conservation Foundation, another land trust just south of us in like Kane, Kendall, Will, DuPage counties. So they started it, and then we started here in McHenry County. Like we adopted it from them, and it's being adopted in other counties too. It's moved up into Wisconsin. So it's really heartwarming when you think about all the people that are making a difference on their properties and kind of joining in this like family, this Conservation at Home family, and they're supporting their local nonprofit land trust as well. Okay, so here's resources. You're going to be emailed this recording, so you don't have to write all these down. I just put in some places to buy native plants here in McHenry County. Right here in Crystal Lake, Countryside Nursery, they carry native plants. They have a section. Over the last 5 years, I'm really impressed with them. They've started carrying more and more native plants. They've invited me in to do programming for them. They're a Conservation at Work certified business because they have native plant gardens on site and organic gardens, vegetable gardens that their employees can take from. And it's just a really cool little local nursery. And a bunch of other places too that you can go visit. There's mail order options. Let's say you're not here in McHenry County and you're from somewhere else. There's mail order options like Prairie Moon Nursery and Prairie Nursery that are fantastic. Their websites, you guys, I use Prairie Moon's website pretty much every day I'm at work. Okay, I'm constantly referring to it. To find out what's the growth requirements for this plant, where's its native range. So let's say I'm like, I don't know if butterfly weed is native to my area. How do I know that? prairiemoon.com, type in butterfly weed in the search bar. It's going to bring up all the plant info, including a range map. You guys, I geek out about this. You could tell to the county level where that plant is native to. Yeah, I know. All right, anyway, Heather Holm, her books. Here's one of them. Pollinators of Native Plants. Love it. Not only, okay, she's got a crazy background in entomology, graphic design, and restoration ecology, and photography. Like, she's amazing. So she brings all of that into her books that are very user-friendly, and she's got some garden designs in the back of this book, and they're actually really good garden designs. I've seen some native plant garden designs that just incorporate plants that are way too aggressive for small gardens. I would never put like big blue stem and Indian grass in a little 20 by 20 garden, so her designs are pretty good like that. And there's Doug Tallamy's books. Oh my gosh, read them, be inspired to change the world, basically. And the little trick I taught you guys about hoeing instead of pulling the weed, that came from Garden Revolution. That's like horticulture design meets landscape ecology. I'm super obsessed with that book too. I've read it multiple times. The Land Conservancy, we started a Facebook page called Learn, Landowner Ecology and Restoration Network, whatever. It's a free private Facebook group. You can just post questions there and we'll jump on and answer your questions. And so will botanists or restoration ecologists or knowledgeable landowners from around the county, okay? Or around the whole Midwest, not just the county. So lots of different resources on this page. Feel free to email me too, okay? My email is down there. And Katie, do we want to see if we have any questions?
Yes, let's see what we have here. And thank you so much. That was so fun and so informative. And I just wanted to apologize for saying that you were part of the McHenry County Conservation District. In everything I've written about this program, I had Land Conservancy of McHenry County, so I don't know why I said that. But
It's
thank
okay.
you so much. Then we got you to explain the difference, and that was great. Thank you so much for that.
No problem.
You're awesome. Let's see what we have here for questions. Okay. This question is from Carol Elkins. She says, "Hi, Sarah. I'm glad
Hi,
you're
I know
hosting."
Carol.
Oh, hi. Best friend. She said, "I was actually going to email you to ask you what you're seeing in terms of native bees this year in your gardens and areas you frequent with pollinator plants. I am noting quite a void with bumblebees on plants where I normally see them. Others are reporting the same across the suburbs, and I see many comments on Facebook groups suggesting the same. Thank you for your thoughts."
So I personally in my own garden, which is where I spend the most time, especially during the coronavirus, I'm seeing a lot. I don't minutely track species though. I don't know. I guess I'm not organized enough to do that. I've got kids and a dog and whatever. I have found so many monarch caterpillars. It's crazy. And tons. I have seen the most lightning bugs that I've ever seen. I've definitely seen bumblebees. I'm not blown away by the numbers, and this is all anecdotal. This isn't data. This isn't data in any way. And that's how a lot of citizen science is. And it's valuable, honestly. But to Carol's point, I have heard other people saying the same thing, that they haven't noticed as much in their yards. There's a lot of factors for that. I mean, our climate is changing and we are experiencing intense precipitation in numbers, like in levels that we haven't seen. We just keep setting records every spring. And that's going to have an effect on everything, not just annoying flooding in your yard. It's having an effect on like the weird black spots that everybody's finding in their maple leaves right now. That's a fungus because it's just too wet in the spring. And it was really cool this spring too. So that's going to have an effect on insects. All these little things are interconnected. So personally, I've been seeing a lot of stuff in my gardens, but I have heard other people say the same as Carol did too.
Gotcha. Let's see, next question. Oh, Carol, we just want to say thanks. I thought about the wettest May being an issue as well. Yes. Nora Herrera, she said, "I live in the city and I don't have a huge yard. Are gardening beds as effective as planting directly on the ground?"
Yes, you can put native plants in like a raised bed garden. Absolutely, you can totally do that. There's tons of people in the city that do that, and it's completely fine. What I recommend, because raised beds, you usually are putting in like extremely rich soil in that, is stick with plants that like medium moisture. If you choose plants that like dry, they're just going to have an insane party in that rich soil, and they're going to grow way too tall, and they're going to be way floppy and not look attractive. So just stick with medium moisture plants. Again, Prairie Moon's website, they've got an amazing filtering capability where you could be like, I want medium moisture, shade, blooming purple in July, 2 feet tall. Like, you can narrow it down amazingly on their website to see what plants will meet your parameters. So, good question.
That is a great question, because some people don't have that yard space, so that's awesome.
Right.
Oh, you got another one from Carol. She says, do you grow Amsonia? If so, which one do you think is best for our area? Wondering if you use Amsonia tabernaemontana, I'm sure I'm saying that wrong, or Amsonia hubrichti?
Right, yes. Okay, so Carol, I personally have not put Amsonia in, not because I have anything against it, just because I just haven't. So, all right, I'm literally Googling this right now. What I would do is I would check the native range of those Amsonias, and pick one, because I know they're further south, I think. So pick one that's native to within 100 miles of us here in Northern Illinois. I know there's totally people that put those in. That like Blue Star Amsonia, I don't remember which one it is. I think it's the Amsonia taber or whatever. That one's a gorgeous landscaping plant, and a lot of native pollinators really like that one too. And I've seen that one in gardens before. So those are great ones. I would go on Prairie Moon's website, find the native range of the various Amsonias, and pick one that's local, the most local that you can find.
And Carol says, thanks, that's what I've done. I thought Tabernaemonta was the better one, but Natives Haven, for instance, carries the hubrichti.
Yes. So Natives Haven is this cool 6-acre nursery up in Harvard, and they carry a variety of native plants and some cultivars too, that are not necessarily only native to Northern Illinois. So you'll find a variety of native plants, and what I like to do, again, I just whip my phone out and I just Google like Amsonia blah blah native range, or I do it on Prairie Moon's website to figure it out. So yes.
Awesome. This question, Carol says, thanks again. Love it. Excuse me. This question is from Jan Jones. She says, 2 questions. What would you suggest for hillside ground cover, and what plants for periodically wet areas?
Okay, so hillside ground cover, are we talking shade or sun? Jan, can you type that in right now? Shade or sun? If not, okay, while we're waiting for that, let me address the wet plants. Did she answer it, Katie?
Not yet.
Okay.
Oh,
so,
she said both. She said shade and sun.
Oh, okay. So in that case, hillside, I would get some dense, like fibrous rooted plants in. So I would plug in either the grasses if it's sun, so like prairie dropseed and little blue stem would be 2, and side oats grama. Any of those 3 I would plug in as the backbone of the planting, okay? And then in between them, I would plug the pretty flowers. So, the butterfly weed, the purple prairie clover, whatever, all kinds of things within that. But those grasses need to make up the matrix of it. For shade, instead of prairie dropseed or little blue stem, I would plug in sedges. So, oh gosh, don't even get me started on sedges. I'm so obsessed with them. Like, they just look like little flowy grass, like fancy grass basically, but they're not grass. And there's so many different kinds of them, and they are so amazing from a design perspective, but also functionally stopping soil erosion because their root systems are so fibrous and amazing. So in shade, I would plug in Pennsylvania sedge, or its Latin is Carex pennsylvanica, and that one can go in sun too. And it's gonna stay under a foot, and it's flowy and gorgeous looking. And it greens up in the early spring. Perfect way to suppress early cool season weeds. That's what it's gonna do, okay? So shade, I would do Carex pennsylvanica or Carex rosea. I don't remember the common name for that. There's like a million common names for that one. I don't know, like gold starred something sedge. I don't know. Carex, Carex, and then rosea, Rosea. Those two were, those plants, and other sedges too, would have made up the woodland floor of our historic oak woodlands around here. Okay, so they are so important. I plug them every year in my woods, and I plug them in my gardens, and they spread, not aggressively, but they spread rhizomatously. And so you're able to split them and move them and get free plants. I mean, it's awesome. So yeah, sedges. And then there's a ton of little beautiful flowers that you can plug in between them, like that Jacob's ladder, the ginger. Oh my goodness, you guys, I've seen ginger growing out of cliff faces. Like, that plant is amazing. Yeah, there's a ton of little things, but get those sedges in there in the shade areas. Okay, wet plants. There's some really cool wet plants that you can put in, like great blue lobelia and cardinal flower, and again, the sedges. So box sedge is one that really likes wet, and scirpus, so bulrush, dark green bulrush. Gosh, I love that one. I've got a little tiny creek down at the base of my property at the back of my woods, and it's sunny. And there's bulrush down there and these different sedges, the fox sedge, and then there's all different kinds of oval sedges that love wet, and they're beautiful. They're just beautiful. So put some of those down there. If you've got space, there's, I think it's sweet Joe Pye weed that, yeah, it's gonna grow. It's gonna grow aggressively, but it's beautiful. So if you've got space, that's a good one that likes the wet down there too. Monkey flower, turtle head, like there's a lot of cool wet plants. Again, go to Prairie Moon and do that filtering, okay? And you'll be able to see all the pretty pictures instead of me just spouting plant names at you.
Wonderful. This is just a comment from Nora. She had asked about the planting in the city. She just said, "Thank you so much. This is the first time I will attempt to make a garden that helps pollinators, and I am super excited."
That is amazing. That's so cool. Good for you, Nora. Email me if you have questions.
Here is another question from Anonymous. If you wanted to start a pollinator garden from scratch, when would be the best time to do it?
Spring. So kill your grass or whatever you need to kill, you know, whatever vegetation is there, kill it. You could kill it in the fall if you wanted to. Or you can just kill it in the early spring. If you're just gonna like cut the sod out or something, you can do that. I would do that in April. And then native plants can be put in in April or May, honestly. I mean, I've done bare root planting, which I really like, bare root stuff. You can't get bare root from a lot of places. That's literally just like, you can get it from Prairie Moon. That's like you're ordering and they're sending you the live root packed in moist peat moss, okay? And you're planting the root really early. Like I've planted a bare root garden in the snow, like in the first week in April. There's a picture of my husband out there doing it with me. It's crazy. And anyway, but you can plant live plants, like live plugs and stuff in April too. And they'll be fine. You know, they'll be totally fine. So April or May is a great time to do it. You can do it in June, July, and August as well. You've just got to be really committed to watering, like consistent watering, okay? It's hard to plant in the heat of the summer, but you can do it. Definitely. I've done it. I've like moved prairie plants, mature prairie plants. It was an emergency, you guys, right? In August, and chucked them in like my vegetable garden where I had space and watered the heck out of them, and they're totally fine. So you could do it. You could do it in the fall too. I've had mixed success with fall planting. You can absolutely do it though. September, I would say. I wouldn't do it in October. It's starting to get a little too cold, but September you can do it then as well.
So for watering, let's say you were to start one like tomorrow, if anybody's feeling inspired. So how often would you want to be watering? Like once a day, twice a day?
Yeah, once a day if it's not raining at all. Yeah, water once a day, preferably early in the morning, but whatever. You just water when your life allows you to water. Water at least daily for the first 3 weeks. And then after that, monitor the weather. You might be able to stretch it to every other day. Like I would really watch the plants. If you're gonna plant, you know, in like July or that kind of thing, I would just really watch them and watch the weather. But just be committed to watering and you can completely do it. It'll be fine.
Awesome. Thank you. Jan wrote back in to say thank you, and then Carol said, "Yay, Nora!" Gave Nora a cheer for starting her garden.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Awesome. So anybody else have any other questions? We are out of questions. So if you have anything you would like to know, now's the time. But other than that, Sarah did encourage everybody to email her and reach out if you have questions after this. And she's so wonderful to talk to. She's always super responsive when we were planning this program. So reach out, you guys. Use our resources in the community.
Thank you.
Carol wants to add, excellent presentation, Sarah. Thanks so much. I agree. Thank you. Thank you for taking the time.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Any last thoughts for us, Sarah?
No, just find your local land trust. Even if you're not here in McHenry County. I mean, obviously the Land Conservancy in McHenry County is awesome. But if you find a landtrust.org, you could just type your zip code in and find them, because our job is to support you as private landowners in doing this kind of stuff. Okay, so reach out and see what kind of resources they have and become a member or volunteer, something.
That's awesome. Thank you so much.
You are welcome.
So everybody, this webinar has been recorded. We will be putting it up on YouTube and emailing all of our registrants with the link. So be sure to keep an eye out for that. Again, thank you so much to Sarah McHale from the Land Conservancy of McHenry County. And we hope to have her back sometime. If anybody has any topics that they'd want us to cover through the library, please let us know. We'd love to work with Sarah again. So thank you so much for coming, everybody. And thank you again, Sarah. And everybody have a wonderful night.
Thanks, you too.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye, everyone.